presentation on, oh, I forgot about the recording part. All right, I'll start again. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our presentation on saving time while designing for equity in your community. I hope everyone's having a good day. So let me see if that works. It's not letting me, Milagro.
No.
All right, so for our today's agenda, we'll first be going over why time management is important. We'll provide a time schedule skeleton, also have a teacher-student resources you guys can use, and an open Q&A towards the end of our presentation.
Sorry, I can't find my mouse.
It's okay. So before we begin, my name is Amy Gonzalez. I'm a student at SDSU, a recent transfer, and I'm majoring in electrical engineering, and I'm part of the California MESA, and I'll have my partner present herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Milagro Ramos. I'm also a member of California MESA. So I'm the SDSU Outreach and Student Success Coordinator for the SDSU College of Engineering. And I am also a product of MESA. I used to be an NADC competitor back when it was the Windmill Energy Challenge, back in like 2010 to like 2012-ish. But I was in MESA for a good portion of, well, all of middle school and then partial of high school. So I do have a little bit of hands-on experience with NADC. I've also have been a part of different judging panels for the competition. So I do have a lot of observations about different things about NADC. And so I hope I can share those with you today.
Awesome.
Great.
All right, so what are our goals and objectives for this workshop? So we want to encourage team building, camaraderie throughout the project, help guide students as they build a structure to hold themselves accountable, provide recommendations that can be adapted to student needs, and provide an example of a strategic plan with goals and progress reports.
All right, so before we kind of get going, we're going to ask that either you drop any answers in the chat or even kind of shout them out loud. But we just want to know what your relationship with time is when it comes to NADC, either good or bad. And this could be your personal relationship to time, or your students' relationship to time, or like things that you've observed when it comes in relationship to time and NADC. But we're just going to take a moment to kind of get some answers. All right. Cool. So we got a good. All right. So we got after school clubs that meet once or twice a week. Struggle to get everything done. Yeah, definitely. I can see that. Do we got any more? Anything. You can either shout it out or drop it in the chat. Whatever you're most comfortable with. I know back when I was in middle school doing this, I had a very difficult time visualizing how much time we had in between actual events. So the first time I ever submitted what is now known as a design brief, but we called it a technical report. I didn't even get 3 pages in because I thought I could handle typing like 15 pages in a week, and I could not. So it is very difficult sometimes when something is so far away to like actually realize like it feels far, but it's not. It's closer than you think when you factor in all the work and research that.
Yeah, students can be over optimistic. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. That's something that sometimes I still struggle with today, but
yeah, right. Like right now in my school projects, man, these people don't know how to time manage. So I can only imagine how others are.
Have you ever heard any complaints from anybody when they're working on their projects?
Oh, for me?
To anyone.
Oh my God. Yeah, absolutely. Figuring out the efficient order in which to do everything. Yeah, especially with like NADC, there's a lot going on, and
you want to do everything at once and nothing at once, but it feels like you can't start anything without doing another thing first. Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about how to help students navigate that as well. Ooh, somebody else came in.
Well, there's nothing worse than knowing that your students have been working on diligently and trying to meet their deadlines, and then their, I don't know, their flash drive, it gets corrupted, or they didn't do a backup or something, or didn't save periodically. This is before autosave or even Google, where you can go back in time in some of these platforms, right, and get an earlier version. So I don't know if that's not necessarily a complaint, but it certainly does happen.
Yeah,
It's happened before,
Correct.
and then you're trying to meet that deadline to get everything in, even though you knew you were already quite there, and then things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I remember, I think that happened to our team once, and that's just, your stomach just falls. It's so bad. But no, things definitely happen, especially when students have been working so hard and then things out of your control just, that happened. For anyone who just came in, we're just having a quick icebreaker. If you could tell us a little bit about what either your relationship to time and NEDC is, either good or bad, or students, anything you've observed with like students' relationship to time. A few more people too.
So I will say, in Colorado, I know like our school year ends third, fourth week of May, and the NEDC is usually the third, fourth week in June. And so keeping the students engaged during the summertime and making sure all those components are where they need to be is something that we have as a state have really struggled with on best supporting the students and the teachers that are representing us in the NEDC. So just that calendar difference has kind of posed a problem too.
No, absolutely. Especially since like when classes are in, you kind of have that momentum going. You can just kind of, but once the school year ends, like it seems like all motivation goes out the door. Which, fair. That happens to me when I go on break too. All right. So if we have nothing else for the last question that just came in, if there's anything to add about relationship with time when it comes to NEDC, either yours or your students, and this could be good or bad, that you've observed or personally experienced yourself or your students have experienced. But if there is nothing else, we will move on to the meat and potatoes of our presentation. Sweet. All right, so I know that when it comes to time and NEDC, and it is such a big event, and there's a lot of parts, the time that they have, regardless of when they start, it just never feels like enough, and that you need more time. Like if you just had a week longer, it'll, the design brief would be better, my prototype would work, my presentation would be stronger. It just never feels like enough. Which is why it's important to practice good time management for projects like NEDC. A thing that I know from experience and just from what I've observed with students is that as the deadline comes closer, they start rushing other parts that they haven't gotten to. And, when it comes time to they're there to compete, they're completely burnt out because they've been staying up late or working nonstop just to kind of get those last bits of it. So the more that we can help them, guide them a little bit more to like a better time management or a better way to split their time can kind of mitigate that, so that way they still got a good drive going by the time that they, get to their main competition day or days if they make it on. So efficiency using time can help achieve better results in less time. So it's easier to focus on smaller deadlines and kind of claw your way there. So by the time that you reach each small deadline, you build more and more of your main project. And by the end of it, you have a whole project ready to go. And just also something to keep in mind that students are more motivated by purpose over just submitting something for the sake of submitting it. So we kind of want to frame things like a passion project over an assignment, because with a passion project, that also kind of helps with keeping the drive going, because this is something that they're working on because they want to work on it, rather than, this is just something that they have to do to, either travel to get somewhere, or just because like their advisor, their teacher told them, or their parents even told them this would be a cool idea. We want to kind of stoke that flame of passion for them, so that, there is a lot more drive, and there's more drive to keep going. Where's my mouse? Alrighty, so I guess the best way to think about how to manage time within a team of students is to kind of think about what it's like to go to a restaurant. You've been treated to like this fine dining establishment. You get seated and you are brought out the most exquisite appetizers. You were brought out the most mouth-watering entree of your life. Mind you, this is all free. And then at the very end, you think there's no room, but then they bring out the most decadent dessert you have ever seen in your life. And you have had this wonderful experience in about maybe 2 hours. But that's kind of also the way to think about NEDC when it comes to each component. You have a very strong, very technical design brief that you submit. That's the first thing you do. You get to competition. Your students give a wonderful pitch that, expresses everything that they need to. They cover the rubric beautifully. When they go into that technical interview, they're able to answer everything perfectly, and their prototype works excellently. All the judges are super impressed. And their poster symposium, it's like they've done research before. Like, this can't be their first poster symposium. And they have about 2 months to kind of do the same thing. But like I said, each person and their role adds to the experience. So like with the fine dining example, you have your salad and starter. That's usually prepped by your appetizer and sauce chef. Your main entree, that's either your beef and poultry chef, your fish chef, or your veggie chef. So there's multiple people working on that entree, depending on what it is that you order. And of course, your desserts are prepped by your dessert chef. Again, they usually have 2 hours to get you in and out of there, but still give you the most amazing experience. So everything has to be done quickly and on time. It's the same thing with NEDC. Your design briefing, your poster, maybe one student is really strong in writing, so they're going to take care of that. Your prototype and data, maybe you have 2 students who are really good at building and or coding, so those are going to be your build leads and your software leads. They're going to take care of the prototype and do all the like data and research for that. Your pitch and technical info. One of the teammates has really strong presentation skills, and they're very persuasive when it comes to kind of pitch, and they're good at recognizing information. They're going to be in charge of the pitch and technical info. So you each have a student kind of taking on smaller portions of that task, and they each have things to do within that. And then they have those 2 months to get that entire project out. It's doable as long as they all work together. But also a key role, or kind of like a key part of making sure that that is possible for them, is considering who your head chef of the kitchen is. So if anyone's familiar with kind of kitchens, or if they've ever watched like restaurant shows, you have your head chef, and that person in a really fancy like fine dining place, like one of those French ones, they don't do anything. They don't really cook anything, but they are there making sure that the plates look good, that everything is cooked to temperature. They're wiping down everything so that everything's presentable. They're pushing the food out to the server so that way they get to the table on time. But for students, your head chef are your mentors. So why are mentors important in this situation? Well, mentors are very imperative to, getting that guidance that students need. While students are kind of preoccupied with just making sure that the project gets done, that head chef, that mentor, is going to make sure that, they're checking in, making sure that everything is going to plan. They're going to be reminding the team about any deadlines that they have, like, hey, your design brief is due in like 2 weeks and you're still like tinkering with your prototype. Maybe you should start testing it. Maybe you should get it to your user. There's always a need for someone to check in on those components and give those like just slight tuning details. Like, they need to practice their pitch. That mentor is going to be that person that they can pitch to. And then that mentor is going to be that person who tells them like, hey, it's great, but you're missing a couple of portions of this rubric. Here's maybe how you can add to that. Or, It seems like one team member is talking a lot and the rest of you aren't talking at all. Maybe we should kind of divvy these roles up. Mentors only make the team stronger. And I know the previous reps from California, I don't know if any of you were part of that workshop. They gave a wonderful presentation on how to find and kind of hone your mentors for your students. So that would be a great resource to look into if you were wondering, like, how do you find mentors? For me personally, when I was in NEBC, I turned to my teacher and my advisor. My advisor was super fantastic, and he was always on top of us, making sure that we were taking notes, that we were, inputting everything into like Excel. So we had fairly strong teams by the time we got there. We personally never got to nationals, but he took a couple teams to nationals. But he was very helpful and he was very dedicated. He has since retired, unfortunately. But excuse me. Teachers are also another great source. If you have any other teachers besides yourselves who can kind of, that don't mind reading a design brief or, taking a couple minutes out of their day to give them that technical interview, that's a really great resource, especially because students are already comfortable with teachers, especially if like they are comfortable enough to ask. So it takes a little bit of edge off. Also, older students that have competed before, they're excellent mentors as well. Again, when I was in grade school, my advisor would call back some of the students who had since gone on to high school. They would call them back into the middle school and be like, hey, so these students are all working on the same project you did. Could you give them some tips or like check out their project, make sure that it's, give them some insight about what they should be looking at. And those students would, they happily came back and they were, they each kind of paired off with the team. And, they were helping with like, oh, hey, like, it's not moving that fast. Have you tried lubricating this specific joint? Or like, hey, maybe try a different material because it seems like it's too heavy to move. Stuff like that. Because they have that experience. They've gone through the whole process. So they have that kind of background to then give to the current competitors, your current students. Also, good mentors are parents. Sometimes some parents are very, very involved, and if they can help, that's a great place to start as well. But again, our other California reps, they did give an excellent presentation about where to find and how to hone your mentors to kind of provide an excellent resource for your students. But with time management, there are best practices, especially if you're thinking about making sure that each student is able to work on their tasks in the most efficient way possible. So initially, you want to make sure that each student establishes roles, and that is a role that focuses mainly on their strengths. So like I mentioned, if your sauce chef is really good at making sauces, then they're going to be a great sauce chef. Likewise, if the person who's in charge of the pitch is really good at presenting and is really good at writing scripts, they're going to be a really strong person to work on that pitch. But you also want to make sure that not like one student isn't working on the entire presentation by themselves with just a little bit of assistance from the rest of them, because that one student will become burnt out. And eventually it's going to cause some discourse if they're the only one working on it. So it's best to make sure that when the work is divided, it is divided as evenly as possible. Of course, students are multi-talented and they can help each other out, but it should be spread evenly across the teams. So that way that one or two students don't become burned out by the end of it, or when it actually comes to presenting in front of the judges, you can tell which, if it's that situation where two of the students worked really hard on it and the other two were just kind of there for funsies. When it comes to like the interview and the pitch and the poster presentation, you can tell who those two students are because they are the ones doing all of the talking. They're the ones who know everything about that presentation, and the other two are just kind of there for funsies. So we just kind of want to avoid that, make sure that each student is as equally involved as they possibly can. Another important thing is to have a plan. Have students prioritize tasks. Now, with so many tasks within NEDC, it's really hard to do that sometimes, but we do have a resource for you to kind of help you visualize it a little bit more. But with that plan, it's very helpful to set internal deadlines beforehand. And this is where we kind of ask that like advisors kind of take that extra step in where, we do have resources so that they can turn in progress reports. You just make sure that they turn those in, that they have something to turn in, because if they do, it means that they are working on it. and they are being efficient with their time. Also a good thing with group projects is to make sure that they have a platform to communicate with. Now with it, there's so many platforms to communicate. You have SMS group chats, Discord, GChat, Messenger, so many more. But as long as every student has access to that group chat and they can, reach each other fairly easily, that should be the main one. As long as they decide that early on and they're like, hey, we're gonna just text each other in the group chat and that's the way we're gonna communicate, then that's the way that they're gonna communicate. With team meetings, it is, somebody mentioned before, students that meet after school, maybe like once or twice a week, they're not gonna have enough time. So it's best to kind of make sure that teams set up like, hey, we're gonna meet this many times a week for this many, hours or hour. And if the initial time that they set up doesn't work for them anymore and it's getting closer to the competition date, they're not done. Maybe they should kind of increase the frequency. They might need someone to kind of let them know like, hey, it doesn't look like you're gonna have enough time. If you keep meeting like this, maybe add on another day or like add on another hour to your regular meeting times. And then making sure that they keep organized is also very, very important, especially with a lot of deadlines, a lot of information, a lot of data flying around. Making sure that they write everything down, either on a shared Google Doc, on a notebook. I know for us, when I competed, we had one notebook, one very important notebook where we had all of our trial runs, all of our data, any changes that we did, any sketches that we did, it all went into that one notebook. Now, this is before we had I think Google Drive was still like in its nascent stages, so we didn't know about it yet. So we just used one notebook and that was our engineering notebook and all of us wrote into it. So when it came down to like writing the technical report or doing the presentation, I took that notebook and I was just sitting there reading through all the notes because, as you make changes and as time goes on, and if they get further and further into the competition, they're going to forget what they did at the beginning. So it's good to have that, one consolidated place to have all those notes. And then, along with keeping organized, it's very important to keep track of deadlines. So we do have a resource for you. We're going to link all of these resources at the very end in a folder, as well as this presentation. We've also included it. But to help keep organized, we've created a due date tracker, essentially. So as you can see, it does track the date right at the very top corner, and it does update every single day as long as you refresh it. It'll tell you how long nationals is in, how long state is in, or how much time they have between regionals. And then if you have a prelims, then it tells you that as well. The only thing that you and your students have to do is update those deadlines. So currently, these are just kind of general deadlines, except for nationals. That one I do believe is accurate, but you are welcome to change it if it's not. But yeah, so you would input what date your state competition is. If you have a regional competition, you would input that as well. Same thing with your preliminary competition, if you have that as well. It's also helpful if you have like a mini competition or like a mini run within your, like if you want to input that, so that way they have a good trial run before the actual competition, that would be an excellent place to kind of keep track of that. Internal deadlines. And we'll talk about which deadlines later on, because they are part of a different resource that we are including. But we have a tracker for that as well. And then we have component deadlines. So these are the ones that are for the actual competition. If you have to submit your design brief earlier, then that you would put the due date for that in there. Same thing with your pitch and poster. If your MESA Center requires you to submit that earlier, or your state, whoever's doing state requires you to submit that earlier, you would put those dates in there. And then it gives you an idea of how much time you have left. Also, a cool detail about this particular tracker is it gives you the days that you have, like the actual calendar days, but it also gives you school days, because, some students, they don't want to meet on the weekends or during vacation. But if you look at the actual, like the second number, the one to the right, that is the actual amount of days that they have if they only meet during school days. Ooh, we have something in the chat. Yeah. Yeah, if you also want to just kind of highlight that, like, hey, if you're not meeting on weekends, if you're not meeting on vacations, like, you only have 58 days until your first competition. that's a great way to kind of like help them visualize like, oh, I don't have 2 months, I have maybe a month and a half. Or, you know, nationals is 200 days away, but really it's 142 days away if you don't count all those weekends. Except for the due dates in kind of like this smaller section here, that is actual days, including weekends. But, you know, that's something that they want to work on over the weekend. You know, with internal deadline, that's totally doable. We've also included a kind of to-do list down here. Once you actually see it in, you know, the resource in person or like on your computer, once we link to it, you will see that it is a very long list. They are welcome to edit it or delete or add sections, but it would allow them to, if you notice on the left, it gives them the tasks that they have to do and excuse me, and what component it's related to. Then they can assign it per student. Like maybe student 1 and 3 are really good at, you know, coding. So they would be in charge of making sure that the software is ready to use and that, you know, the sensors are working or whatever it is, if they're building something in person, or that the app runs smoothly, if that's what they're doing. So you would check off students 1 and 3. And then once students 1 and 3 have completed that task, they go ahead and hit completed, that box turns green. And it kind of helps them kind of see what things that they have to do and what things have been completed. I personally, one of those people that if I see a bunch of checks on a list, I get super motivated because like, oh my God, I'm almost done. And I'd love to see that kind of like green thing turn greener and greener every single time. However, it can get a little stressful if, you know, the date's coming and there's not a lot of green on there. But it does kind of remind you that if you have like maybe 10 days left and your list is still mostly white, to get on it because you are running out of time and you still have a lot of things to go. All right, so that's just a little bit on this resource. You are welcome to check that out once we've linked it. But yeah, Amy, if you want to take it away from here.
Yeah, so once you have your teams ready, you know, the kids already know what they wanna be, who they want to work with, it's time to train. But before I go on with the next slides, just take in mind you can adjust this to however you see fit with your students or teams. It's not mandatory. But what do I mean by train? By train, excuse me, by train, it's basically an abbreviation of a time schedule skeleton. So for week 1, they can begin with team building and delegating, and that's where you could see the first soft deadline comes in. I'll go more into detail on how specifically that will look like. The 2nd to 3rd week, they'll be researching and interviewing their clients. And the 3rd and 4th week, they assemble their prototype. They gather materials, you know, prototyping. And for the next week, like 4 to 5 week, they improve their design, the prototype they did before. They begin finalizing it since, you know, that's where the main deadline starts coming in, as you could see. And lastly, the last 2 weeks, that's where everything has to be done. This is where, you know, they shouldn't be struggling and, you know, trying to scramble and finish everything off. Now, like I said, for week 1, the team building and delegating comes in. Students should have their teams established. Like you as a mentor can have them like write down on the document who their names, their roles, their responsibilities they're gonna have, and, you know, start brainstorming on what they want to do. They consider the inequalities or anything really that comes up. This is the beginning. Now, I think we jumped the slide. Can you go back?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I'm gonna find my my mouse.
Yeah, technology is not being very nice to us today.
It's not, but it's fine. There we go. I have 2 screens going on. I can see what's happening. But so what we mean by the first soft deadline is that we have different agreements for students, because I know it's kind of, you know, if students don't talk about these things early on and kind of set these hard boundaries and, you know, talk about what strengths that they have, it's a little bit more difficult down the line to kind of get them to then kind of take on certain duties. So we just want to get it all out in the air as soon as possible. So I don't know if anyone was in the other California reps presentation. They also shared the sample agreement. It's meant for teams and mentors. And in it, part 1 and 3 are for teams to plan, kind of, talk about what their goals are for the project, both internally and just like in general for the project. It lets them kind of list out their strengths, what they're good at, because that also kind of helps with delegating tasks. It helps them establish their roles. Maybe they want to break it up by component. Someone wants to be in charge of the pitch, someone wants to be in charge of the technical presentation, so on and so forth. Maybe they want to break it down, which is what I've seen most often, where they have like a research lead, a build lead, a software lead, and then a communications lead. That's also a great way to divide it, but it's really up to your students. And this worksheet kind of helps them figure that out. This is also a really great place to talk about how they're going to do that, what tasks that they have to do. And then if they want to go back to the due date tracker list, this is also a great way. They can either use that or they can use this worksheet to kind of populate it. Essentially, it kind of starts like an early to-do list. They can negotiate like when they're going to meet, how often they're going to meet. If and when they get a mentor, they can start meeting with the mentor as well. So that way they have someone to kind of look, guide them and push them. If, you're their mentor, then, you can kind of set like every so often you're going to meet together just to kind of touch base. Like maybe you're meeting every soft deadline date, just to kind of make sure that everything's going well. And then maybe a couple times a week, closer to the competition to help them practice. Again, nothing has to be used, but if this is something that you would like to use, it is available for you to make a copy of and share with your students, so that way they have a place to kind of talk about this. Also during the teammate agreement, I don't think it's in the worksheet, but it is also very nice for students to talk about other obligations that they have, because I have seen it several times where students work really, really hard. And then suddenly one of the team members takes off because they had like a soccer competition, or their family decided to go to Hawaii for a month and they are just springing it on them, like maybe a week before they leave. So if they know about any dates that might conflict with any meeting times or even competition times, like this is a good time to kind of talk about those things so that they can plan ahead for it.
All right, so now it's week 2 or 3. Researching and interviewing has to start. They need to identify the inequities, start asking questions like what disadvantages there are. They have to choose like what they're going to address for their project, because you can't do too many. You have to focus in one. And again, interview the clients, ask them what would make their life easier and the possible solutions. And if they have sketches at this point, that's where they can implement it. Yeah, and then next slide.
All right, so then after this kind of like, they maybe have about 2 weeks to kind of interview. This is like a minimum time. They can take as much time as they like, depending on how early they start. But, if they are kind of like that 1.5 months out, they have 2 weeks. And at the end of those 2 weeks, a really good soft deadline to have for them, either to turn into you or their mentor, is the first half of their design brief. So the design brief is actually an excellent way to keep track of everything. They can work on it as they are building their project. So for that first soft deadline, after just the initial research and interview section, when they're having that interaction with their user or potential users, or they're interviewing professionals, by the end of those 2 weeks, they should have their project purpose. What is their project going to do? They should have that user research. This is where they should be putting in like, 50% of so-and-so does this thing. And like all the resources that they use, they should, have that ready to go. User insight, if they're interviewing users, or if they're kind of, they're looking at surveys from different organizations that help their user. That's they should be inputting it there. So they should have their user insights section ready, as well as their user needs. They should know what their user is, what needs their project is going to help or going to provide. What's the verb I'm looking for here? Anyways, the user needs section should be done by the end of this.
And then now they have to assemble their prototype. Obviously, they're gonna need materials and they should have that all listed out because you don't want the kids running around at the end because they missed something. Prototypes, it's not the final design. This is where there will be multiple versions, so they're just testing it out. And this is where the third soft deadline comes in, the progress report towards the end of the 4th week, depending how you see fit. And they have to make sure that the prototype is tested at this point.
So yeah, so third soft deadline, if you go back to the design brief, they should be able to complete their project goals. The key features of their design, because at this point they should have, I guess, the first iteration of their prototype, and it should be ready to go so that if they go to a user and say like, hey, use this, does it solve any issues for you? Their user can say, hey, like, I like it, I like these features. However, I would like it to do X, Y, Z, or you can improve it here. It should be ready to go, not necessarily, you don't have to do it quite yet at this point, but it should be ready to go, if that makes sense. And at this point, they should start taking pictures of the first iteration, the second iteration, the third iteration. But they should have kind of like different images and graphics of their prototypes at this point. This could also be screenshots if they're working on apps, because I've definitely seen people work on apps. Images of the code or even videos of the actual interface. And this would be a good time to kind of like, it's like right before they push it out to, other users to get feedback. Yeah.
All right, now we're getting close to the end. Need to start and, improving the design and finalizing it. This is where they need the feedback. If, something's not working, is there a malfunction? What can we improve? And of course, data collection, having it all written down somewhere or in a Word document, but they need to have it somewhere, not just in their minds. Their final prototype, it needs to be, final. They need if there's a few updates they need to do, they better get to it. And of course, the impact, how does the project impact the user you focused on? And has the inequity been met? Were you able to meet with the user's needs? Why or why not? And finally, the main deadline, the design brief is due.
Okay, so usually design briefs are due anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks before the actual competition. So in that week, the week of when that design brief is due, they should be finishing off the rest of the design brief and then looking back at their previous section, just doing some updating, some cleaning up, making sure the word counts are there. At this point, they should have their project title. They can work on the abstract because the abstract should be the last thing that they work on, as it's like the quick summary and rundown of the presentation. At this point, they shouldn't be tinkering with their initial designs anymore. At this point, they should be tinkering with the improved version of their initial design. So that way they can talk about the impact that it's had on their user if they have like a specific person or just kind of like their trial testers. If in case the project, like, they want to do some more things to the project, but it's getting close to competition, but it's still, they have data on it. They can update on the status of the project. Like, hey, like, this is what we have currently, but these are our goals for either next competition or, if we actually turn this into a company, like this is where we would want to take it. And at this point, this would be a good time for the team to kind of get together and reflect on just their project in general and what they've learned and what they would like to work on, things like that. And then of course, making sure that they have enough time to get this to several different eyes so that they have somebody to look over and proofread it. And, just double check that all the rubrics have been, or every component of the rubric has been met or at least touched on. But yeah, also once the design brief is due, you're getting to that week of the design brief. And I've definitely seen this where they're getting really close to that deadline and they are still working on their like initial design. They haven't gotten any user data or anything like that. This is a good time to push them like, hey, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work perfectly. You just need that user data, because ultimately, and I kind of keep, I guess, emphasizing this with either students or advisors that I have talked to before, since like, I have done like the typical interview portion where, if it doesn't necessarily work the day of competition, but they have the rest of the stuff, they can still get a really good score, either in their pitch or in their technical presentation. Because if you look at the actual breakdown of the rubric, whether it functions or not is a small portion of the actual points that they can receive. But making sure that they have all that data, the graphics, the user impact, the research that they've done, they've done those like tests and everything. If they have everything else and they can talk about it fully, they can still get a very good score. So yeah, that's also just something to think about in terms of, making sure that they don't focus on the wrong thing when deadlines are approaching.
And lastly, the last 4th and 5th week, they need to begin their poster and complete it. Make sure they follow the poster requirements. And then the pitch, decide who will say the pitch, what they're going to say. Of course, practice, it's very important. And an example can be kind of like Shark Tank you can give to your students. Have them maybe watch an episode, and so they have an idea. And the technical presentation, is everything organized? Does everything make sense? And the final deadline, competition day.
Also, just a quick note, during this time, it's good to encourage their students to, reach out to people besides their mentors to kind of get extra feedback. The more eyes look at it, the better, because, they get different insight in different aspects. So just help them improve that presentation. But again, all of these soft deadline dates are included in the tracker as well, that students can input, or that you can input for your students as you make a copy, to kind of help them visualize how much time that they have left. It's also a good time to, for their soft deadlines, it gives you a chance to kind of like check and be like, how well are things working out? How's it going? And so on and so forth. Also, just a quick note about this skeleton. Oh, excuse me. It is not meant to be something that they are rushing for 6 weeks. If they want to start 3 months before their competition day, they can start 3 months before their competition day. This is just kind of like the minimum time that we recommend that they spend on each of the components or each of the phases. So that way they still have enough time to work on everything. And, of course, like none of these are very strict. Like if they want to start building like week 1 and build for a month, they can totally do that. But this is just kind of like a good way to think about how to break things down. All right, so we do have about 15 minutes left. Yeah, we did it. We timed it correctly. Awesome. So if anyone has any questions for me or for Amy or about anything, please feel free to ask. We'll be here for the next 15 minutes to help support. And then at the very end, we will also link the folder that we have all the resources, including this presentation, included in, so that you can make copies of them and share with your students or review it for yourself. But yeah, so we'll open up the floor.
So Milagro, you had referred to a previous session if we had attended it, which we didn't. Well, I know I didn't. And one of the resources was part of that other presentation. Will that be part of the folder that you're sharing with us?
The previous presentation? Like
well, you referenced something, the sheet from the previous presentation. You said it was shared there as well. So I'm not sure if I think it was the sample agreement or something. Is that part of what you're sharing with us today?
Yes, it will be included in our folder as well. I do believe all of the sessions are recorded.
Yes, let me add into this. Yeah, all the sessions are being recorded and they will be available to everybody who attends or registered. There'll be a website that you will be able to get all of this information as well as the handouts.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, so no worries. You will have access to everything. But yeah, any other questions regarding either the time skeleton or tips? I know it was a lot of information. So again, this presentation will be shared just in case you want to look over it again. or because the session is being recorded, you can kind of listen to it, listen back to it. And just kind of stop me or Amy talking for a little second when you catch up if you need to do that. But did we include the QR code? Oh my God, we did not. But we will go ahead and link everything towards the end. And then of course, we'll go ahead and share the other California reps emails. And ooh, we do have a question in the chat. Yay. Oh, of course, you're welcome. But yeah, we're still going to stick around here for about 15 minutes. Actually, let's see if I can't.
I have a kind of like a comment. I teach in a small school, and so our kids are being pulled in various directions with sports, with different clubs. So I'm really going to utilize the team agreement, and that way they could put down any commitments that they have, games, whatnot, and then they could see kind of how the timeline fits in and where their role is. So I think that's great. Definitely learned something today. Good job.
I'm glad that that was helpful. I do remember back when I was also competing, we were all a bunch of nerds that were just, and we said yes to everything. So we were all a part of different clubs. I was band geek. So it was also something that we did have to talk about. Like, I can't come on Thursdays because I have rehearsal from this time to this time, or I have volleyball from this time to this time. I can't come to this. So it meant that we had to compromise and meet on weekends occasionally. Or our advisor, he didn't have any kids, so he was able to come in on like vacations and all that stuff. So he opened up his workshop, because he was a shop teacher, he opened up his shop over like winter break for like a week, and all of us would come in and we would work on it, because we talked about the fact that like we're losing time on certain days because we have other obligations. So we should meet. We should take we should take advantage of the extra time that is given to us. For them, it just means that they might have to go to each other's houses and work on it. But making sure that they kind of talk about those obligations early on is super important. So that way it's not like 2 weeks before the actual competition, or, the person who's mainly in charge of the design brief is like, hey, my family's going on vacation for like 2 weeks, okay, bye. And suddenly they don't have anybody to write their design brief because, they were the main person. There is a link to the resources. Actually that's what I was looking for. I'm actually going to share a QR code with everybody as soon as I. Amy, if you could share your screen actually, and actually show the folder that with all the resources, and then I can pull up the QR code so that way they have a link to it.
All right, give me a second. You want the QR code? Because I have that. Let me just double check it works. All right, let me share screen. Are you able to see it?
So yeah, that is the QR code to the main folder. In it, you'll find a copy of this presentation. I've also included a PDF of the design brief template that has been color coded based on the soft deadline. Yeah, so your role as a mentor is, I guess, also helping them like utilize their resources, both like the ones that we've provided here, or if you have you know, if they're doing something that helps with like medicine or disease, maybe you're pushing them to like certain websites or to look in a certain direction. Of course, none of you are doing this for them, or, you know, none of the mentors should be doing this for them. But just kind of like a nudge in the right direction. Also just a good thing to do, as advisors, just, you know, dropping in every so often, making sure that things are kind of running smoothly. You know, making sure that the team still gets along, because I know with high stress and, you know, a lot of work, sometimes, you know, arguments do erupt here and there. You know, keeping the peace is always nice. Yeah. But yeah, also in the folder, if nobody has access to the folder, I'm sure there will be links to everything in the website that he mentioned. So you will have access to everything eventually. Yeah. So Caprina, I hope that answered your question. Awesome. Alrighty.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Awesome. Great to hear.
Should I stop sharing?
Did everyone get the QR code? Either like a react or just like a yes. Sweet. If not, again, you will have access to everything we've shared today, either through this code or through the website that everything will be shared on. So like, no worries if you didn't get the QR code to work. But yeah. Amy, you can stop. Like, I'm quickly going to share my screen. But if the QR code worked, this is what you should be looking at. Like I said, this is our presentation. This is the design brief color coded. So if you kind of like look at this, it'll let you know what sections they should have done by which soft deadline due date, whichever date you choose or their mentor chooses, or, you know, what they agree on. But yeah, so that way they can work on, you know, their own template, not necessarily this one, but they know which sections to fill out by a certain date. Your due date tracker is here as well. That's going to be the actual countdown with the days and their to-do lists, essentially, with assignments for who's going to be the lead on those tasks. And then the sample agreement that we talked about earlier will be here. All right, so that is going to be the end of our presentation in terms of content. If nobody else has any questions, if there are any questions later on, you know, you can either reach out to our other California rep, Luis Topete, who is my director. I work for him directly, or Beatrice Prieto, who works at Fresno State. She was actually my director when I was in middle school. So that's also really fun. So she knows, she probably remembers when I was competing way back when. But yeah. Oh yeah, the QR code works. Fantastic.
I do remember. It was great having her as a student. I want to thank Milagro and Amy for taking the time today and doing this presentation. We hope that the teachers found this very useful. Do use the resources, great resources that they provided for us today. So thank you, ladies, so much for joining us today and doing the presentation. Just a few closing remarks. At 2:15 Mountain Time, 1:15 Pacific Time, you have a break, and that break is from 2:15 to 2:20 Mountain Time. And then at 2:20 Mountain Time will be the closing ceremony, closing remarks. And the closing remarks will be done using the same link that you used to listen to the keynote and the welcome and introductions. So that's how you can go back in there. And then there will be a survey at the end of as well too that Anita will give you access to. So thank you so much. If there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.